Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, the comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Nile.
And I'm Kyle,
Are we doing, that's the bit we're doing?
I guess.
Yeah, no, it works. Hi Kyle, how are you doing this week?
I never know what tack to take. I feel like it's 50-50 if I say I'm Kyle or if I say I killed Kyle. So what is the truth this week?
Well, I think we've killed him enough times that for now I think we can just say that you locked him in the hallway.
Okay.
So
Great.
Kyle's banging on the door outside of our apartment, really just trying to get on the show. No, Kyle's away this week. He had some personal stuff, so we brought back in front of the show Jules to fill his ample boots.
This is a test run for when I inevitably take over on the show. So if you want me to usurp Kyle, text 1 for yes and 2 for no to 22299 It Gets Weird Boulevard.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll be tallying those results. And
you can this is being recorded live as you're listening to this, so you can text it right now.
Call toll free now. Which, Jules, speaking of call toll free now, this is a Fuck Your Documentary episode. Part of the great long running series that's everyone's favorite, right behind Campfire Stories and probably regular episodes. I don't know your personal feelings on the matter, but we're doing a documentary this week. Jules and I just watched the, I believe, HBOMax Original Documentary, Call Me Miss Cleo, about none other than Miss Cleo, the phone psychic from the 90s, and the whole thing about that. So
what is the demographic for your listenership? Is it people our age who would have seen Miss Cleo on TV growing up?
I think that's actually a weird question. I feel like I'm kind of on the upper middle end of the demographic for this podcast. I only know the people that are more actively listening.
Yeah.
Because like our Discord is filled with I would say the people that are a little more bought in on the podcast because they actually give us money. And I'm like in the upper middle area of the range for there, I think. So, but I feel like
like early 20s / late teens babies wouldn't know Miss Cleo.
You know what I realized? I did not even think in doing this documentary that I would have to explain the concept of Miss Cleo, which I'm now realizing I probably do have to do just to be safe.
And that's why I'm replacing Kyle.
Yeah, this is actually a really you whenever you guess, not to pull back the curtain too much, but your continual note is you guys just assume people know things.
I usually am the one stopping you and saying like, wait, let's explain what that is.
Yeah, and so like, sure, it's nice to think that people listen to the entire back catalog and know everything we're talking about, but it's
I
not
certainly
always
don't.
True, so yeah, Miss Cleo was I keep wanting to say telemarketer, but that's not it, like a telephone psychic, or really she was the spokesperson for a psychic hotline in the 90s, and till
psychic hotlines were a really, really popular thing in the 90s.
Yes.
Hotlines in general, it was a really big deal. It was like in that sort of slightly pre-internet to early internet days, in that sort of like time, it was a way. The infomercials were on the rise. You could call in and order things, and it was very popular to do stuff that way. I feel like QVC also had a big like boom in the 90s.
Yeah.
Because people would be up late watching TV, and what else could you do except for call a 1-800 number?
Yeah, you get lulled in by the Billy Mays of the world and the Vince what was his last fucking name? Oh man, the slap chop guy.
The slap chop guy. Of course.
And
did you ever call a number like that though and get in trouble because you cost your parents money? I feel like that was a very typical sort of 90s kid experience.
I didn't, because I was one of those kids that was like deathly terrified of being in trouble.
Me too. I was very afraid. I was very aware there would be a record that I did it, and that like there wouldn't be any sort of weaseling out of it, like that I called. So I never went through with it.
Yeah, and also like most of them that I saw, like I did see Miss Cleo ads as a kid. I remember hearing about that, but I was always a kid that wanted to be older than I was, and so I feel like I was trying to be cynical from an early age. So even back then, I saw the for entertainment only and was like, oh, it's all fake. But the thing that I did realize while watching this documentary was, as a kid, I did assume that if you called, you would call Miss Cleo specifically.
That you would get through to her.
It didn't. The idea of a phone bank was not something that was in my brain at the time.
So basically, it would be these infomercials where Miss Cleo, but there were other psychics doing the same thing. But this documentary is about Miss Cleo because she's sort of the one who stands out from the pack and became a celebrity of her own right. And that there was all this controversy around her, and that's why they did the documentary. But if you have never seen it before, the infomercials would basically go, there would be a psychic, and they would be sitting with a tarot deck spread out in front of them, or a crystal ball, or other sort of paraphernalia that implied mysticism.
Yep.
And they would say, if you call me right now, I'll give you a tarot reading, and I'll tell you what to do with your life.
I'll tell you the secrets of how to fulfill whatever.
Yeah.
And they were all like, I think it's safe to say they were all a scam. And this was just a thing that like was a way that people made money in these days doing television.
And like you're saying, Miss Cleo, underneath the phone number, it said for entertainment only.
Yeah.
And there was always sort of this like fine print, we can't actually predict the future thing, but it cost $4.99 a minute.
Yep.
To call the hotline. And like I think most of them were around that. Like that was pretty typical. That was the other thing that scared me. I've always been very susceptible to commercials, especially when I was a kid. And when it would say like call now for free, I wanted to call so bad. I wanted to call stuff like that so bad. But I still understood the idea that only the first 3 minutes were free. And I was like, there's no way. There's no way that I will get away with this.
I think the closest I got to one of these types of things was either the like Nintendo hotline or what was the this isn't the exact same thing, but I think of it in the same category of light scam. The record deal where you would for like 5 cents you would get like 50 CDs or whatever the fuck that those things in magazines were.
Oh, I'm not as no.
It was this thing where like you joined this CD club and you got big discounts on your first like 10 CDs were free, and people would just like open accounts and find ways to scam it and get a bunch of free CDs and stuff.
Oh, okay.
But it was like a total fucking thing. It was like after that you had to buy so many things per month, and they were like inflated prices. It was
the thing I always wanted to send away for was that the artist test.
Okay. Wait, what?
Sorry. It was like a thing where they said mail in your name and address, and we will send you this like booklet that you draw this turtle. It was like there was a very specific illustration on the ad that is seared into my mind. Okay. And if you can draw it, you'll win art lessons or something. It was like something like that.
I have never heard of this in my life.
Oh, I used to see it all the time, and I wanted to be an artist so badly.
So you had to basically like try to draw the thing that they sent you, and then
basically, they just wanted you to recreate an illustration, but it was like really they were trying to sell you these art books.
Okay, so it was like a course or like an art.
That's how I remember it.
Okay,
yeah. This was when I was like a kid, and
Fair.
I would see these ads on TV.
I had no idea that existed, but it makes a lot of sense. I immediately thought of that like internet thing where you draw a horse, and like the way you draw, like which way it's facing means something, and like which, however that
That's
works.
a classic.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a baseline question. Okay. How much do you believe in tarot in general outside of the realm of like a TV psychic? So, because you're saying obviously these TV psychics are all a scam. How much do you believe in fortune tellers or tarot or things like that?
This is a thing. I think that there is a certain chaos to probability and interpretation, where it's kind of like how the whole thing of if you flip a coin and you're like trying to make a tough decision and you flip a coin and in the air you like really want it to be heads, you find
the
that
act
out about
of
yourself.
Flipping the coin is what tells you what to do. Yeah.
I think for lack of a better term, I think rituals can have meaning to people, and those rituals can be anything. It can be the flipping a coin when you're unsure because maybe your brain will push you in that direction, or it could be someone trying to gauge your reactions to these things and find how you feel, like how these tarot cards hit you at that moment. And there's not like they can see the future or talk to dead people or anything, but there can be revelations through this kind of chaotic interpretation. That's kind of how I feel about it. It's not a.
So you don't think anybody like has any sort of special ability to be able to read tarot cards or commune in that way?
I don't know.
You think it's all just sort of psychosomatic?
I really don't know. I think that there are people who are more open to different types of thought than others, but I don't know. I truly don't know where I stand, because like I've read.
Do you believe in an afterlife? Have these questions been put to you on a podcast?
Not directly.
Am I grilling you right now?
These are things that I think Kyle and I have talked occasionally during episodes about things like around this, but never really gotten to a like straight up, what do you believe?
Everyone is going to be disappointed that I'm asking you while Kyle's not here, because I'm sure that people who listen to this podcast regularly would love to have both of you answer side by side.
Well, here's the thing. I think Kyle is more upfront about some of these things.
He's more upfront, but also I think if I asked him outright, he would fuck with me.
Yeah, probably.
Don't you think he would just fuck around? You're very earnestly answering me, which I appreciate, but like I feel like Kyle would be like, you know what? I think like that Elvis is still alive. Like he would just start fucking with me.
I really probably am answering this stuff too earnestly, but it's
for your comedy podcast.
Yeah, I have to keep reminding myself that that's what it is, and I'm not just here talking to, my partner.
That we're not just chatting.
Yeah.
It's hard because now we do a podcast where we don't have to try to be funny. We are just chatting.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're in that mode right now. You be funny. Say something funny, Nile. Talk about anal probes and shit.
Jesus. Yeah. That's
really scrape the bottom of the barrel.
See, this is the problem. I always make Kyle do that. I mean, Kyle's gonna be the one that says the most ridiculous things. No, I always like have a fascination with the like idea of these like parasocial relationships that happen with figures like
with someone
Miss Cleo.
Like Miss Cleo.
Like,
yeah,
that was the thing that I wish that the documentary was more about. Like I realized this was a documentary about like the full life of Miss Cleo.
But to me, the person who like talked the most was the chick from Mad TV who didn't even know her, was just like sort of waxing philosophical about the idea of her.
Yeah, just did parodies of her on Mad TV.
But the stuff she was saying about her, and if the documentary had focused more on the fact that that was a parasocial relationship, that she didn't actually know her, I think that like there was more to kind of delve into there.
Yeah.
And instead it was trying to be this like very sort of sympathetic and understanding look at a real person. And I was like, is that really what anybody who wants to watch a documentary about Miss Cleo like is showing up for? I think that it would be so much more interesting to make a documentary about the cultural phenomena of these psychic hotlines in general, but specifically why Miss Cleo would have hit the way that she did. I think like the first quarter of the documentary is about this,
Yes.
which is why did she choose to put on a sort of Jamaican accent?
Mhm.
Why is she sort of putting on that culture as a costume in order to do this? Why did that make her more popular? And like, why did she choose to do that? What about that character of Miss Cleo struck a nerve with people?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first sort of quarter of the documentary is about that, and then it veers off into a lot of other stuff. When I think that the meaty part is about the psychic hotlines, and instead it wanted to talk about her coming out and the sort of like the trial about against psychics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all fine, but I feel like that all could have been confined to like a 10 or 15 minute sort of YouTube essay.
Yeah.
And the other stuff that you get from actually interviewing people was the interesting stuff.
Yeah, there was a very weird. I guess the best way I can say it is it didn't feel like this documentary was trying to do one thing. It felt like it was like the start, like a bit of 4 different versions of a documentary on this topic, all smushed into one with a lot of filler between those things.
And I think the end dragged.
Yeah,
they were really repeating themselves at the end. The whole end of this documentary is just like accounts from people who knew her talking about what a great person she was and how sad it was when she died.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big chunk of this documentary where I go, aren't you supposed to be telling me facts?
Yeah.
Like, you're a documentary. Tell me something that happened. Okay, she died and all these people were really sad. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that like heartless of me? I really started to tune out at the end.
Okay. I think that there is a version of this documentary where that would have hit better.
Yeah.
And that would be a one that is more about really getting to the heart of the identity question, because there is kind of a through line of talking about identity and the fact that she basically had her childhood was somewhat mysterious. It didn't, like, at least no one on screen was telling us this is 100% how she grew up. There were like 2 different stories that kind of were told to 2 different eras of her life, basically. And you heard those, but you don't really know for sure. And if you look at this, like, if you set this up at Miss Cleo as this person who came out of this like nebulous identity and only really found her true self and identity through at the like end of her life, and everything else was her playing with these different characters and things that were her trying to cope with whatever, that could be an interesting kind of through line. But it keeps taking diversions into this, the like the bringing down of PRN, the Psychic Readers Network, the company that created the Miss Cleo thing. And then also like a couple other side documentaries as well. It's like a weird mixed bag that also doesn't say much.
This documentary did have one of my favorite documentary side character tropes, which is like hotshot lawyer who thinks he did something really fucking tough in court, and really you go, you sound like a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
I hated that guy. I like
the DA or the FTC guy?
The DA.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
The DA who was like bragging about like what we did. My favorite part was when he was like, and what we did that set us our case apart was that we actually named Miss Cleo as a defendant, and no one else had done that up until that point. Everyone else had only been naming Psychic Readers Network. And then you let the documentary play out for like 3 minutes of people talking about the trial.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually somebody's like, and really, you couldn't pin anything on her because she didn't run the company. And the actual fraud was being run by the people who ran the company. And she was just an actor who worked there.
So she was removed from the lawsuit.
She was removed. And it's like, yeah. And that's really what set them apart. That guy really thought he fucking did something because he named her in the papers. And I just was like, he just seemed like such a jerk. He went on for like 5 minutes about how like, and we had her birth certificate, and she was born in Los Angeles. So how could you possibly be from Jamaica if you were born in Los Angeles? And I was like, Do you know how many people are born someplace and then live someplace else?
Yeah.
In their early childhood, so they say they're from there and they have an accent from there. How many people were born in England but raised in America, or vice versa? How common that is?
The cut from that to the person who was kind of there to talk about Caribbean diaspora was good, because it was like, that's a thing. Like,
culturally, that's very normal. Like, especially for people who would call themselves Jamaican. Yeah. She was like, that's actually really common that they might have a birth certificate from someplace else.
He out of the whole documentary, that the DA, I forget his actual name, David something. He was a DA in Palm Beach, Florida, where this case was. He was the one that most felt like he hadn't moved on from the public perception of Miss Cleo at the time. He was still in the, like, Miss Cleo was this big charlatan that was defrauding people and trying to hurt you and take your money, and I need to stand up for my constituents. And even though his own investigation ended up with, it wasn't her. I mean, she was being used, and I don't think she is absolutely blameless.
But it was the two fucking white guys running the company who were defrauding people and who were like charging people for calls that they never made and shit like that. That's the actual fraudulent part of all of this.
Yes.
I think that guy was still very much trying to be like claiming that you're a psychic and just saying those 3 magic words for entertainment only. That doesn't strip you of any responsibility. And that claiming you're a psychic, that's fraudulent. And I'm always very torn on stuff like this, because like TV mediums and TV psychics and even just people who, like, when you go by and you see a neon sign in a window that says fortune tellers, $20 or whatever. I think that there is a thing that most people who are doing that are complete frauds. They are psych, basically, where they don't believe in what they're saying at all. And they are doing it just to make a buck.
Yep.
They want to make money, and they are probably good at reading people, good at understanding. Like, they can tell when you walk in what you want to hear, and they tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
I think that is what that is. But I personally don't think that means that you are scamming people. I don't consider that a scam, because the people who are going to a psychic want to pay for the reassurance that a psychic is going to give them. I think the fact that one half of that equation doesn't believe that dead people are actually talking to them doesn't mean that the person isn't getting their money's worth.
Yeah.
I think that where it goes into scamming directly, when you talk about a psychic scamming a person, is when they know that person doesn't have the money to be spending on it, and they continually tell them, and you have to pay me another $20 to find out this or this or this. Yeah. But most people who do that aren't doing that. I think that that's like a lot less common than the type of people who are just, I will sit and do a reading, and they do it because they like the attention and the money, and the other person feels better when they leave.
And when you come down to it, that's honestly the thing there. That's the difference, is this difference of scale. Because the PRN stuff was a scam, because they were just taking anybody off the street who could read a script.
Yep.
Having people call in looking for effectively cheapish therapy, or just someone to run their problems up against, and just made like $1 billion or whatever the fuck.
Yeah. So. And so I do think that that's fucked up.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, we're sitting in the room in our house right now that has my tarot deck on it and my book on tarot. And I like doing tarot readings, and I like having other people do readings for me. I think that I get a sense of comfort from it. I use it much like you were describing a coin toss, where I don't necessarily 100% of the time wake up every day believing tarot cards hold some special power. Mm-hmm. But I think that I have done readings for myself and for others that helped myself and others to understand a situation that we were trying to ask a question about. And reading the meaning behind the cards gave clarity that couldn't have come without sort of trying to work it out in that way. Mm-hmm. And so I really like tarot reading, and I like the idea of calling a psychic hotline and asking them, like, do you think my boyfriend's cheating on me? Yeah. I think that, like, there is just a comfort inherent in that.
I think that's like yeah. I think I started out when I started this podcast. I was quite a bit more shut off to things like this. Um, and I haven't moved that much. It just is I've really, through examining a lot of out there beliefs, found that like this stuff that's absolutely harmless, like a tarot reading inherently, if you strip it of its capitalistic
Yeah.
structure in the PRN stuff, is harmless.
If
And
you
it
and I
can
just sat
help.
right now and did a tarot reading, there is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And so I don't see any problems with people who find comfort or get something positive out of it. So,
Would you ever do it? Or would you just, like, if I said to you right now, let me do a tarot reading for you? Or would you tell me no?
no, I would, I don't know what I would ask. Like, I don't know. But
You don't even necessarily have to have a question.
fair.
It helps to have a question, but you can do just general sort of like, how's my life?
Yeah.
What's up? Kind of
I mean, I
readings.
guess I would. I don't know what I would. I don't know. I'd have
One
to.
of the most common ones that like sort of amateur people do is just like a past, present, future thing. You just
okay.
draw 3 cards, and it's supposed to tell you
just
something.
like a 1 card thing.
You draw 3 cards, past, present, and future.
Right. Sorry, I meant 1 for each question
Yeah.
instead of like, because basically why I was asking this, because most of my like everything in the world of paganism, tarot, witchcraft, like all of these kinds of things, the only way I have come around them is through entertainment media. And most of these things only really look at tarot as this thing where you're like drawing a card and then another card and laying them over, and they're in different paths and stuff.
Yeah.
And it ends up looking more like a game of dominoes
Yeah.
than anything else.
There is like a really common layout that's basically like a cross.
Yeah.
The placement of the cards all have a meaning.
Gotcha.
I mean, like I almost wish that Kyle was here. I would compare it to Magic the Gathering. You can like tap your death card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You
fun.
do have to kind of lay
See,
it out.
This is the fun thing. Whenever I don't know if he has the same thought that I do. Whenever Kyle is not on this podcast, I feel like it is kind of my duty to drop in little things that would pop him specifically.
Yeah.
Because then it's like a test on if he actually listens to this episode or
Are
not.
you testing him? I mean, like
No,
whenever
I'm
I
not.
bring up Kyle when he's not on, it's because I pleasantly think to myself, he'll probably listen to this.
Yeah.
But you're going, I want to see if that little fucker listens when he's not on.
Not that the answer matters, but
Yeah.
the journey is the fun part.
That's funny.
So,
Do you listen when you're not on? When you're sick? Have you listened to the ones that I hosted with Kyle?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've hosted more alone with you than alone with Kyle.
Well, here's
haven't
the
I?
thing. I think I've edited a couple of those.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So,
You're the stronger editor in your couple. That's what I'm going to start asking straight couples. Which
Who's
one
the
of
stronger
you
editor?
edits the podcast?
And which one makes the Twitter posts?
Yes.
I did like in the very beginning of this documentary the way that it kind of tried to explain paid numbers, and like it took like 3 minutes to explain the 90s commercials and phone lines.
Yeah.
In a way that I thought was kind of funny, which is I mean, I guess that is for people who weren't around at that time.
That's what we did at the beginning of this podcast.
But we did it specifically for Miss Cleo. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It is the same thing.
We didn't talk about that sort of like that culture too. Like I feel like Raven was sort of talking about in the 90s as a kid watching TV. It was the like height of sitcoms. So you would end up sitting and watching these blocks of television that were like 4 hours sometimes of just like one sitcom would be playing, or 2 or 3 in hour blocks, where it would be like, I used to just watch like 4 episodes of Seinfeld, and then I would watch, Friends came on after it, but I wasn't necessarily doing that at the time. But like, it would be like a bunch of reruns of Seinfeld, and then I would watch some USA show.
Yeah.
And so you get so many commercials. You just end up sitting and watching commercials.
Yeah.
I know you used to watch Nick at Night.
Yes. I was a Nick at Night kid. I do not know why to this day. But I just liked that era of sitcoms. Cheers was on there, Brady Bunch was on there. I was never as big into Brady Bunch, but my brother was.
Cosby Show.
Cosby Show.
Full House?
Different Strokes. I didn't never really watch Full House.
Okay.
It was more of the New York-y type sitcoms
Fair.
that I like for some reason. And yeah,
You also generally, I think, with most of the stuff that you've told me you were into, you liked stuff that was very targeted at adults, and I was the same way. If there was a more childish aspect to the sitcom, you wouldn't be as into it.
Yep.
And Full House, I think there's a big sort of...
It's the little girls.
Yeah.
But
I didn't watch Full House though, so maybe that's an incorrect perception. But that's part of why I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't watch that one. It just I remember turning it on one time and seeing it was the episode where the Beach Boys were on it, and I instantly was like, "Nope, I'm done."
No, thank you.
Which was like a
you
weird
are
reaction
truly
for
a
me.
certified hater, just a total hater.
I really
I would have been excited to see the Beach Boys. That would have made me sit and watch it.
But see, I was already like getting into like alternative music and thought that the Beach Boys were lame. So
meanwhile, a bunch of the people who you listen to probably love the Beach Boys and would have told you that you're a fucking poser if you don't get what's good about them.
Now, to be fair, this would be post Brian Wilson Beach Boys, so I don't think that would hold true quite as much. I don't think a lot of punks are standing up for Mike Love era Beach Boys.
I'm not saying that,
but yeah,
but yeah,
fair enough. So I did kind of like the little trip through types of infomercials where it was like, comedians and it was like it was one of the Corys being
Corey
like,
Feldman.
Here, you can have my phone number, which is just ridiculous sounding.
That was exactly the type of shit that it was really hard for me not to fucking call in.
Now,
I always wanted to call in and buy blow pens too.
Yes.
There were so many infomercials targeted at kids.
Oh my God, blow pens.
Zoo Books.
I got Zoo Books for a long time.
Zoo Books, yep. I used to be subscribed to Ranger Rick. I used to get the Ranger Rick ads.
Zoo Books is in part, I think, responsible for my arachnophobia.
That makes sense.
There's this image that is burned in my brain from a zoo book of a black widow that scared the ever living piss out of me as a kid.
Even the commercials were kind of unpleasant. They would show spiders a lot. I feel like spiders and snakes and shit. Yeah, that's unpleasant.
But I did, I got Zoo Books. But I did not remember blow pens until just this moment.
I had blow pens. I got blow pens.
I think I went to one of my friends' houses that had them one time.
If you're too young to remember this, blow pens are basically a marker where it is half of it looks like a normal marker and the top half is a clear hollow piece of plastic. And you load it the way that you would load a marker with like an ink thing, but then you blow on the plastic end, and instead of it having like a tip that you draw with, it blows the ink out. So it looked like spray paint kind of.
Yeah, kind of like airbrushy.
Yeah, you could make, it's basically an airbrush that is, instead of being mechanical, you use your mouth.
Yeah.
And the commercials made it seem so exciting, and you could not make art with it.
No,
it's impossible.
It's
you
like
would just
trying to paint with a shotgun.
You know when you'd be messing around in MS Paint and you would try to draw with the spray paint tool.
The good old I have 10 minutes left of computer lab.
Yes, exactly. It was like worse than that. You couldn't make anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had blow pens. I loved my blow pens.
I had the thing that was like the black surface that you would then have like a pen and it would make rainbow stuff underneath it.
That you would like scratch away the black.
But no, it wasn't the one that was scratch away. It was the one that was like a gel type surface.
Oh yeah, I had those.
And then you could wipe it clean.
I had those, yeah.
Yeah, that was some, man.
You want to just reminisce about shit from the 90s? I was a big paper waster. I feel like so much of the stuff that I would ask my parents for basically amounted to how much paper do you want Julia to throw away this week? Like it was just like how many sketch pads and like just like reams of computer paper that you're gonna let her draw on and notebooks, and how many do you want to buy her, and then how much of it do you want her to just rip out and crumple up and throw away immediately?
So you're responsible for like a lot of deforestation.
Yes,
in the
I
mid-90s.
killed the rainforest. I feel like this was so much 90s stuff though was this thing of just like marketing, like, do you want to throw something away? Do you want to buy this just to throw it away?
Do you want your kid to get like a temporary blast of serotonin for about 5 seconds and then throw a lot of things away?
Yeah, this will be instant trash.
Yeah.
And I also used to I used to hang out at on a college campus because I had a family member who worked there, and I would hang out in the computer lab in the library on this college campus. This is when I was in like 6th grade maybe, and I used to just print shit because you could just print. I didn't need a code or anything, so I would just print pages. And I used to go on Neopets and print out images of the fairies and the pets. And because I wasn't internet savvy, I would like just print the image straight from the website. So it would be a full sheet of paper with about a 1/2-inch image, little JPEG, and it would print in black and white.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even, I would print like the pictures of the paintbrushes for the Neopets. I would print like whatever, and then I would take a 6-inch stack of paper home where there was one tiny little image on each sheet. I was just killing the rainforest. I didn't know.
Oh my god, I learned. I think I did like one really awful print job with my parents, and then I learned to download images, put them in Microsoft Word, resize them to fit the page, and then
I started doing that in like probably junior high, early high school. But at the age that I'm talking, I didn't know better.
So
I also one time tried to print one page of a website about John Lennon, and it was one of those where the website was formatted that it looked like you were just on one page, but really the entirety of the website was going to print when you tried to print. So I printed probably about 50 or so pages of this website before I realized that was what was happening.
Yep.
And I tried to cancel it, and I had to like go and get the librarian and ask them to help me stop it. I was just like a child running on this college campus. So there were like adults at the other computers trying to like get their fucking thesis done. And I'm just sitting there like, I have to go visit the giant omelet today.
Printing the entire fucking website dedicated to John Lennon.
Yep.
So if you were a kid and you were between the psychic hotline advertised by Miss Cleo and the one that the commercial included Billy D. Williams, which one would you choose?
but like you're asking me?
Yeah.
Between those two?
Yeah.
I probably would watch Billy D.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I watched him more.
They showed clips of a couple psychic hotlines, one of which had Gary Spivey, who has the most triangular real life Dilbert haircut that I've ever seen.
True.
He's an internet image, Gary Spivey psychic. You'll find the image around online. But they showed his infomercial for a second, the Billy D. Williams one that he was advertising for them, and these are all like, oh, there were like 4 or 5 major phone psychic lines, and
I would go with whoever was like the celebrity who was famous for something else.
Yeah,
because I've always been that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can tell by the person I am right now that is how I would have been when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Oh, he was in Star Wars? I'm going to stay on this channel.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I would have, if I were to have been involved in any of these, I think Miss Cleo was the most charismatic one. Mm-hmm. And I probably would have been, like, I would have found it fun.
I did sit and watch Miss Cleo. Like, yeah. I definitely did. I just loved watching infomercials when I was a kid, though. I've always been an insomniac. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, not being able to sleep, I would just sit and watch infomercials.
Infomercials was always my sign to turn the TV off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like by the time, so I would try to go to bed, not be able to sleep. And when the house got quiet enough that I thought I could go back out in the living room, mm-hmm. like, I would sneak out and it was already past 2 or 3 a.m. So, like, I wasn't up until the infomercials came on. I would, like, go out and turn the TV on after the infomercials had started.
Yeah, most of mine was, like, a lot of times spending the night at one of my friends' houses or whatever, and we'd be watching stuff late, and whenever the infomercial started coming on, that was the time you would put in one of the VHS tapes we had.
Yeah.
So
I also liked late at night to try to go and look on channels for stuff that I thought I wouldn't be allowed to watch otherwise.
Yep.
And I would sit with it on, and I would go from Food Network mm-hmm. to the channel that I was watching the illicit thing on, and then I would keep my finger on the previous button.
Yep.
Remotes used to have a button that said previous that would take you to the last channel that you watched. I literally don't even think that's as common of a thing now.
I know the game well.
Yeah.
At probably too early of an age, watched almost all of Cronenberg's Crash in a hotel room, because it had HBO, so it was uncut, and
it was my homeland.
Yeah.
But the real trick was when the person would be coming into the room, you hit previous and then channel up. That way, if they hit previous, it goes to another innocent channel and not back to the thing that you weren't supposed to be watching.
Yeah, you got to cover your footsteps, you know?
But so I always would have Food Network on. And so I ended up watching a lot of, very actually earnestly watching a lot of Food Network.
Yeah.
But I would be like, I'm talking at an age when I thought like, because Sex and the City had sex in the title, I shouldn't be watching it. So I would like watch 5 seconds of Samantha saying like, and then he ate me out. And I'd be like, oh, she said vagina. Like what? Yeah. It was so wild. Dr. Ruth. Do you remember Dr. Ruth on TV?
I never really watched Dr. Ruth. I was aware of her, but I didn't know anything.
I was very into that, but I would only watch it in these like 2-minute increments because I was so afraid of getting caught watching it that I felt like I couldn't just leave it on. I was always afraid of falling asleep while the channel I wasn't supposed to be watching was on, and then someone coming out and being like, why is Cinemax on right now?
Yeah.
You know?
So Miss Cleo.
I mean, I feel like we're getting off on these tangents because mostly this, like the first half of this documentary being about that sort of era of TV was interesting to me because I lived through it. And then the part about the actual like sort of trial against PRN was very short.
Yep.
Not that informative. And then most of the end of the documentary was just about that this woman was immortal apparently and passed on.
And a lesbian.
Yeah, and came out as a lesbian, which I remember that happening.
Yeah.
That was a big deal when she came out.
I did like the little chunk about her time in Seattle with the theater company.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
That's what I mean. The beginning seemed to be that like it was going to be a documentary about like that this was a real person who ended up playing this character and why she played that character. And then they sort of never figured that out. So the documentary just sort of fizzles off into saying nothing.
It also, there's a point where it just slips in for like a minute into maybe she had like personality alters that came out at points.
They only mention that like once and then they just move on past it and never bring it up again.
Yeah. This documentary, I when it first started out, I was like, oh, what kind of documentary is this going to be? And then it seemed early on like it was going to be kind of a redemption story for Miss Cleo, we're going to build her back up because she's unfairly maligned. You know, she's not a perfect person, but in general, this is a kind of redemption story for her. And it kind of was, but in a way that felt so toothless and unsure that it didn't do a good job of representing either side in a way that really made me have any major thoughts, you know?
Sometimes I get a sense from documentaries where the documentarians are not in it, that they have a hard time getting their point across only using stuff from interviews, because to me, there's this feeling that no one in any of the interviews said something that really rang true to the person who's cutting together the documentary. Yeah. So ultimately nothing gets said because sort of what the person might say who's making the movie wasn't said by anybody else.
Yeah.
Like, so you end up with this, like you're saying, sort of toothless thing. And it also is much easier to make a documentary where you say something if the person, you can take a hardline stance, they were a fraud.
Yeah.
But to me, ultimately, the stuff that most people were saying in interviews was she was a decent person.
Yep.
Miss Cleo was a decent person. And whether or not she was being totally honest about her identity doesn't really matter because she wasn't doing it to hurt anybody. And that isn't going to be as interesting as if you're fucking, what's your name, with Theranos or whatever, and you just were lying out your ass about everything. Then you can make a really biting documentary about how, like, she scammed people. But with Miss Cleo, everybody was just kind of like, she was really nice.
She was kind of taken advantage of by, she was taken advantage of by PRN.
Yeah.
And so like she became the figurehead of this thing that people thought like the thing that I could have really seen this documentary doing is looking at how big of the impact was on her, and the company basically was like, had a little tap on the arm and then were sent on their merry way. And the company doesn't exist anymore, but like the people that ran it had a little slap on the wrist, and that was it, basically.
Yeah. And because she was the face of it, they got away with like I can't even remember their name, and I just watched the documentary.
Yeah, I wrote it down, but I found it. The names of the people are Stephen Fieser and Peter Stolz are the people actually behind
those
PRN.
are the assholes, and no one knows those guys.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would be more interesting to see a documentary about like, why did they choose to do this? How did they write the script that they decided that they ended up using?
Yeah.
That there was this whole system that was basically they would hire anybody, any Joe Schmo who applied could get hired working these phone banks as a psychic, where people would call. These people would just, a lot of them worked from home. They would call, the number would be rerouted back through their landline. And their job was to keep the people on the phone as long as possible.
Yeah.
And it did not matter what you were telling them or why. It only mattered how many minutes they stayed on the line, and that you got their name and address so that they could send them junk mail.
Yep.
And that was the whole system. And I think that a documentary delving into the sort of superstructure of that would have been a lot more interesting than a documentary bit that basically amounted to Miss Cleo was really nice. But like the documentary about the former thing that I'm saying could have easily also been saying, we're trying to clear Miss Cleo's name. She didn't actually really do anything wrong.
Yeah.
These people are the ones who did something wrong. But because they never actually get into PRN in any sort of depth, you end up sort of going, okay, like there is no like flip side of that you can also say that it sheds a more positive light on Miss Cleo, because it never actually points a finger or says anything about anybody.
Yeah, this is a thing that I feel like has become pretty common in the streaming service era.
Yeah.
Because documentaries are getting churned out so much now, and you will have times where it feels like there's some algorithm that is just like, oh, every streaming service is going to put out their Firefest documentary in this month, and they're going to put out their documentary on this thing in that month, and this thing and this thing and this thing. That it feels like they're just trying to basically do a version of the Wikipedia page that is being said to you. And it's not, there's no lens that they're viewing things from. Like the thing that I did notice was one of the executive producers of this documentary was labeled in the documentary as Miss Cleo's godson. And that is, I think is interesting that in nowhere in the documentary does he get an EP credit on his Chiron.
Yeah. Like, don't you think he should have said, so I wanted to help, I helped whatever it was, pitch in money or get this off the ground because I wanted to say this or that about my godmother?
But instead, it just makes this, it really pulls back from having any sort of lens whatsoever. And it's just, it's streaming service filler. It's not entirely uninteresting because Miss Cleo is an interesting person, but it's a very limp documentary about an interesting topic.
Yeah. I just recently watched a documentary on Netflix about Pornhub, and I was like, oh, this might be really interesting because I feel like there's this like big seedy underbelly to internet porn. And I think that it's a thing that not a lot of people really think about how harmful it can be. And ultimately this documentary, I forget what it's even called on Netflix. It's like called Money Shot or something. It's like, yeah, sometimes Pornhub can be pretty bad, but also a lot of real people work in the porn industry, and so you shouldn't demonize all of them. But also maybe they're bad too, and but also these people maybe are bad. I don't know. And it just sort of never said anything. It just kept waffling on this idea of like, I don't know, are the people who want to censor porn bad, or are the people making porn bad, or are the journalists who write about porn bad? I don't know. And it just never took a stance on any of it. It just kept presenting a sort of question of like, what do you think? Do you think these people are bad?
And I feel like this is kind of an interesting thing that we can talk about for this show and the way that we do documentary stuff. I think that I cannot tell you who made this documentary.
No.
I don't know the director behind it. I don't know anything. I saw that one of the guys that was listed as Miss Cleo's godson in the movie was listed as an executive producer because that was the first credit that went up. And the documentaries that I really like, I feel like I have a better sense of the creative force behind them because there actually is a creative force behind them that is not just what feels like empty suits green lighting things that get Google search results. The thing that I looked, if it hadn't been 20 minutes, I probably would have figured out a way to do it for this documentary show. Rodney Asher has a thing on Shudder. Rodney Asher has done multiple documentaries that are interesting form-wise. They're not just traditional documentaries. They cover things that I find interesting, and they have a specific point behind them.
Is this the guy I watched the one with you?
The one on simulation.
I honestly love that documentary. That simulation documentary is great.
He's done that. He's done which I believe is called Beyond something the Matrix, Behind the Matrix, something the Matrix, Glitching the Matrix, maybe, whatever. The Nightmare, which is about sleep paralysis and
I still really want to watch that one. You've recommended it to me before.
And Room 237. Those are
I love that one. I always forget that he's the same guy.
Yes.
I love those.
There's like a 20-minute thing on things that scared people as kids on Shudder.
I want to watch that. Hell yeah, dude.
We'll watch it. I don't know if it can be turned into content, you know.
That's fucking sick though. That's great.
And I think of Rodney Asher as someone who's like, oh, this is a documentary person that I want to see what he does next, because he has, even if I don't always agree exactly with what he is presenting, like with his thesis, there is a thesis there, and it feels like it's created by someone who has a vision and who has something to say. That felt very lacking here.
I'm a big I think that there are two main schools of thought about documentary filmmaking, where there is this sort of much more old school idea that is still very pervasive, that documentarians are only meant to observe and just put what they observe onto film, and you shouldn't try to influence the events, you shouldn't try to sway anything, and you should just be there to record. And then there is the other school of thought that is, if you are observing, you are inherently changing what you're observing, and so you should be influencing what is happening in order to create a film.
Yeah.
And I fall down much more on all of the documentaries that I like are doing that much more than just straight up trying to observe and as unbiased as possible, and as if they weren't there with a camera, just record.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a thing where it's like, by standing there holding a camera and pointing it at someone, you are changing how they're going to behave.
Yeah.
And so why pretend like that's not part of what's happening?
Well, and also just inherently, you are cutting together a documentary.
Yeah.
Therefore, there's no way for it to be entirely unbiased from your worldview.
You're choosing what goes in and what order it gets set in and how it's presented to me, the viewer.
And I think that there is something to be said about people who try to limit that as much as possible, or at least be very upfront with what that is in the work they put out. It isn't always my favorite type of documentary, because sometimes but when it comes to just like getting a series of facts presented to you, it can be pretty effective. But I do also tend to like documentaries that come from a place of fascination with the thing and wanting to engage with it in the way that you're talking about. I usually do find those more entertaining and provoking.
I think it's like Werner Herzog says, like a documentary filmmaker should be a wasp getting in there and stinging and sort of making it happen. And I have always resonated with me much more.
Yeah, but there's a difference between like there's also the bad part of that side, which is like some of the Vice stuff, where like I remember I was doing research for an episode of this podcast about a UFO cult, or like just kind of it is, but it was one that as far as I could tell had no negative side effects. It was just basically like a social circle that liked these things, and there was a Vice thing on it where someone went to one of their ceremonies and was like really just trying to make it something bad, when I could not find anything that was.
And I mean, there's a difference between stimulating what's going on in order to try to put your perspective on it on film, and people who are just straight up lying in order to sensationalize and
Yeah.
put something fraudulent onto film, which is like, that's fucked up. You like Morgan Spurlock can suck a dick.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I
exactly.
mean? Like there is a difference between just straight up like making a fictional film that you claim is a documentary. Obviously, I'm so like inherent to what I'm saying is the implication that like if you are an ethical person, this is how I feel about documentary filmmaking.
Exactly. But I agree. I like the more I like documentaries that come from a specific person's lens. I think that's where they're most interesting.
But I think most there has been an uptick in the production and creation of documentaries for streaming platforms like you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And most of that kind of thing, there is no sort of bar for creativity or production value. It is just like, put this person in a room, mic them up, get them to say something about Miss Cleo, fucking cut it together.
And what I was thinking of, I saw this on, someone mentioned this on Letterboxd. I quickly looked at the Letterboxd reviews between watching it and coming in here, and someone likened it to it feeling like a VH1 thing.
Yeah.
It really, like, these documentaries that come out on streaming services and are like this, that are just like very formulaic, fluffy, not really saying anything type of documentaries, feel like I Love the 90s, the serious version.
I was literally going to say this would have been better if it was just straight up an episode of I Love the 90s where everyone was talking about what they remembered about Miss Cleo.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been more interesting than this.
Yeah.
If like it cut to Michael Ian Black doing an impression of Miss Cleo, I would have been like, I'll watch this for the 22-minute time slot that it's on TV, and that's it. Then you just walk away.
Yep.
And you forget it ever happened. A year from now, if you ask me, do you remember that Call Me Miss Cleo documentary? I will say no, and you're crazy, and I never watched that. And then you will pull it up on my Letterboxd and be like, you gave it 2 stars, and I will say, fuck you.
Yeah, it's. I'll probably remember that. There's like one or two little the quote that was like, she came and made some good plays, didn't pay anyone, and then disappeared was
from when she was at the theater, that she was working at the Langston Hughes Theater.
There are things that were just, that really made me chuckle about this whole story in a way that I think that like I will have a vague recollection of those things, but largely this documentary will not leave a big impression.
Do you have any in the streaming service era, or even slightly before that, like a popular documentary or a documentary series that you watched and actually enjoyed?
I mean, Dark Side of the Ring.
You like Dark Side of the Ring? That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, I've liked. We haven't watched a whole lot of these type of things, like the one on the National Enquirer was a little better than this, but
yeah, that one was also kind of a mess.
But not like a glowing documentary.
I just was curious.
Yeah, I don't know.
When I was talking to you about like the trope of the lawyer, I always think about The Staircase. Mm-hmm. They just now made a dramatized version of The Staircase. But I watched that when it was on initially on Netflix, which is, I don't even remember what year that was now. It was a few years ago.
I don't remember. I remember you watching it.
I watched it when it was pretty popular. And the guy who is his lawyer in that, I love that fucking guy.
Yeah.
I lawyers in documentaries are always really interesting, whether good or bad. Like, they are fascinating it's fascinating to see them, how theatrical lawyers have to be. These guys are actors and they all have this sort of like side to them. Mm-hmm. I love seeing them try to be portrayed on a documentary and try to act normal, because lawyers are not normal people. Lawyers are freaks.
That's fair. Yeah.
But the guy who is his lawyer in The Staircase is one of those where, not like the guy, DA in this one, where I was saying he's a scumbag. You can tell that the DA in the Miss Cleo documentary is a scumbag. This defense attorney in The Staircase, I think, is a genuinely good guy. Like, I like him. I find him really likable, and I think about him all the time. I rewatched part of the documentary when the dramatized series came out. If you haven't seen The Staircase is a really good documentary series.
I know it involves an owl.
See, the owl was a twist that came after the fact.
Okay.
In the initial documentary, they don't really talk about that. They sort of dismiss it, but I feel afterwards, in a lot of the stuff that gets talked about, it's the theory that holds the most water, which is really fucked up because it sounds absurd. Basically, the staircase is about a guy being accused of murdering his wife. And he says that she fell down the stairs while he wasn't in the house, so he didn't know what happened. And when the cops show up, he's like covered in her blood. She is like really fucked up. She's covered in these cuts and stuff. And it's like really obvious to anybody who would have just walked in, this guy killed his wife.
Yeah.
But basically the most pervasive theory is that an owl got into the house and got caught in her hair and she fell down the steps.
Damn.
And that all of the cuts were from his giant fucking
talons. And beak. Yeah.
And there are like multiple experts. They had to do a follow-up episode of the series with experts on owls to say like this actually realistically could have happened.
That had to have been the funniest fucking call to take as an owl expert.
Yeah.
Hey, we're making this follow-up documentary thing about this guy that killed his wife. Oh wait, no, sorry, he didn't kill his wife. We need your expertise. And the guy just looks at his phone and is like, I'm an owl. What are you talking about? Why do you need me for a murder documentary? Well, some stuff's come to light.
Yeah. And he's the reason that the staircase was as popular as it was because the guy being accused of killing his wife is that sort of perfectly morally gray kind of character where you can't tell if he's a good guy or not. That's why it's such a compelling thing to watch. And this is one of those things where I know there is a line that I have a hard time finding where I'm comfortable on of like, should we be watching that for entertainment?
Yeah,
like someone died.
True crime divide.
A real woman died, and this documentary is about like the pain that their family goes through in the wake of her death. And I think that there is a very real argument to be made that no one should be watching any documentaries on shit like that. Yeah. But I still do.
Yeah, I tried to get into true crime podcasts, and it just is something. But like, okay, I don't like true crime podcasts, but I like Behind the Bastards, which is about like, you know, horrible people throughout history.
But I think so much of I've said this on this podcast before, so much of true crime podcasting as a sort of empire right now are people who have no grace at all in talking about the topics that they talk about.
Yeah.
Like they just are not treating it with any kind of respect, and they are treating it like it's a movie. And that's part of like, I think that the staircase came out before there was this boom of Netflixified versions of it, where these were just real documentary filmmakers who heard about this guy who was about to go on trial for killing his wife.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make a movie about the criminal justice system. So it wasn't a thing where they were like, we want to sensationalize whether or not this guy killed his wife.
Yeah.
It was like, we want to follow him and his lawyer through the process of what they do to prepare to go to trial. And it ended up actually being really interesting because this guy like maintained that he was innocent, ended up like they found these emails that he was having an affair with a man, and it's like there's all these twists and turns. And so they sort of accidentally discovered it being this more sensationalized thing. But I think like the intention matters that you set out to make the documentary with.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
Sorry, I got us off on a thing about the staircase.
No, it's fine. Like I feel like this specific documentary is perfectly pleasant to turn on and watch, and you might learn a thing or two about Miss Cleo.
And if you have nostalgia for her, if you actually did watch the infomercial, it's 90 minutes. It goes by pretty quickly, and you'll go, "Oh yeah, Miss Cleo."
Sorry, let me reset this up first, because usually how we end these episodes is, who is this documentary for? And I think that's who it's for. It's for people who have have a memory of Miss Cleo being a person, maybe heard about some of the stuff later in her life, and are just like, you know, want to watch something for an hour and a half and, you know, maybe learn a little bit of it, but not like be challenged in any way.
Maybe someone who's like just learning how to crochet or cross stitch wants something to put on in the background.
So
this is a great 90-minute documentary.
Hey, maybe you just got a new Nintendo Switch game, or maybe you just got your first Nintendo Switch or something, and just want to have stuff on in the background. That makes sense. You're cooking dinner. But I don't think you're going to walk away changed. from this.
When we talk about this era of streaming documentaries, I think that is the biggest thing is they are made knowing you are looking at your phone.
Yep.
This is a documentary that assumes that you are looking at your phone. And that was part of, I think, why we didn't enjoy it at all, because we were 100% watching it. Our focus was undivided.
Yeah. I sat down to take notes, and I mean, I have them. I can tell you what happened in the documentary. But you would learn just as much from just taking 5 minutes on Wikipedia. I think that what sucks is if you judge it for what it set out to do, it effectively accomplished it. It set out to just give you a 90-minute block of people talking about Miss Cleo that you may or may not remember. And that's what it did. But I would be very curious what a documentary about Miss Cleo with higher aspirations looks like.
Yeah.
Because I think she, from the stuff that you got from there, she seems like a pretty interesting person. And I don't think that this really reckoned with her as a person or the identity struggles that seemed inherent to her character in a way that really shed a light on anything. So
I agree.
Yeah. I guess we have to say fuck your documentary now. How do you feel about this doc?
Should I go first or should you go first?
I got to figure out what I'm doing, so I guess you can go first.
Let me think.
Can I sigh the words fuck your documentary? Is that possible, do you think, physically?
You can try.
Fuck your documentary.
That sounded more erotic probably than you meant.
Yeah, look, they mentioned phone sex hotlines early on in this documentary, and it look, maybe that was what I was hoping for. I don't know. No,
I feel like I should get as close to just like fuck your documentary, just like completely even.
Try to deliver the term in the way that Wikipedia would have it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fuck your documentary.
The Times New Roman of fuck your documentaries.
I have a completely neutral outlook on this as a thing. Yeah. I gained nothing from watching it. I lost nothing from watching it. It was completely inoffensive.
Yeah. All I really got out of this in a positive light was remembering that blow pens existed.
Yeah. The other thing I do like actually is at the end, it was a bunch of older gay people talking about being older and gay. I do love to see older queer people thriving there. And there is specifically one of the people was a transgender man who dated Miss Cleo pre-transition, and he seemed happy and thriving. And I love to see older queer people who are doing well.
Yeah, the fact that Miss Cleo went from that relationship to a recently out 61-year-old woman, or at least maybe there were people between, but it didn't. They were not in the documentary.
But those were like her serious relationships after coming out as a lesbian.
That is an interesting, like, that part of her life seems interesting. The way she worked with Equality Florida was the name of the charity that I guess she marched for.
Yeah, they said she basically was a fully out lesbian activist, and like I would have liked to have heard more details about that and like what type of shit that she did and stuff. But like it definitely wanted it to just be a more sort of simple, rosy picture of like she was a good person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that basically is everything. This is on HBO Max. If you have any interest in watching it, that's where we watched it. I believe it's a Max original, so that's the only place to watch it. It is maybe worth your time. Thank you for listening. Now I have to do all of the fucking.
Yeah, I don't have Kyle's script for.
Go
stuff
ahead
like this.
and you do your. Do you want to do your plugs first?
I mean, yeah, sure. How do you normally do it? You guys finish with yours?
Yeah.
I have a podcast called The Outside Dive that I host with you.
If you like this,
it's a weekly podcast. I don't know if you ever mentioned it on this show, but I'll explain what it is. Okay. It's a topical weekly podcast mostly about All Elite Wrestling, but we talk about other professional wrestling. And I think that if you don't watch wrestling, I think you could get into it by listening to our podcast.
Yeah,
and I recommend getting into All Elite Wrestling. And we love to interact with people on Twitter at Outside Divecast. So you can follow us there and find The Outside Dive anywhere podcasts are sold.
Yep. And in terms of It Gets Weird, let me see if I can do all of this off the top of my head. We're on Twitter at IGW Podcast. We're on Facebook.com/It Gets Weird Podcast. We're on all your favorite podcatchers from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird and we're probably there. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/It Gets Weird, I believe. We have a $1, $2, and $5 tiers. $1 is just a tip, just to thank you for the show and the work that we put in. $2 gets you a bonus show every other week. And $5 gets you bonus content literally every single week from It Gets Weird, along with episodes 2 days early. The $2 and $5 tier also gets you into our Patreon exclusive Discord, where you can hang out with us. We're all talking about everything that, the world of weird and everything beyond in there.
On Patreon, when they leave the $1 tip, can they send a message with it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot right now.
Oh, God.
If even one person newly signs up and tips you $1,
Okay.
I will record a mini episode about that
Rodney Asher
Shudder
documentary.
thing.
Okay.
I'll watch that with you, and we will put that on Patreon. If even one person tips you $1 and says in the message, Jules said she would watch that thing on Shudder, and
Okay.
I want you guys to watch it.
All right. That's fine. Yeah, so you may find, depending on how this works out, you may find that episode on our Patreon. Kyle also streams most Sundays on Twitch. I don't know his schedule right now on that. Twitch.tv/it I honestly forget what the Twitch handle is. Sorry, Kyle. But look on our Twitter, you can find it. And
if you join the Discord, you'll get alerts when he goes live.
True. That's a good plug there. So I think that will wrap us up for this week. Thank you all for listening to It Gets Weird, and fuck your documentary.
And everyone send Kyle lots of love.
Yeah.
We miss you, Kyle.
Come back soon. I'm Nile, signing out.